Welcome to Howe Elementary. I appreciate everyone making the time to come out this evening. We have a special guest speaker, Ms. Sarah Hazlett, who is a licensed clinical social worker with over 10 years of experience in treating anxiety in parents, families, and students. Prior to opening her own practice, she has worked with several school districts in providing supports for students and families. And we are very grateful that she is available tonight. I'd like to thank you, our Howe PTA, Lori Howler and Amy Grella, thank you. And then the National PTA Healthy Minds Grant that made this possible for us this evening. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Ms. Sarah Hazlett. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you all for coming. I know there's lots of other things happening tonight with sports and other stuff, so thank you for taking an hour out to come out and learn more about anxiety. That sounds like a really fun time, right? So I do have a practice in Carnegie. I focus on treating anxiety and OCD in the families. I'm trained in family systems, so that's kind of what I love to do. Focus a lot on parents and teens and kids as well. So tonight we're going to be talking about skills, and how do we interrupt these patterns of anxiety. For those of you who attended Lebo University last year, I presented on the SPACE program, which is a parent-focused treatment that deals with kids' anxiety, but the kids are not involved in treatment. It's strictly just parent-based. So tonight it's going to be a little bit different. I will be talking about some components of SPACE, but really focusing on skill building. So here's the game plan of tonight. Oh, before I forget, so the paper's up here. The one sheet is just like an overview of tonight's presentation. On the back are resources that I give to all the families in my practice. And then there's the anxiety cycle, the colorful one. Some of you got like a rating scale, the family accommodation scale. That's not necessarily needed. That was just for information to kind of assess where your family is and how much accommodation you're doing. There's also a sign-up sheet up at the front table. If you are interested, I'm not gonna be able to dive as deep as I want to tonight in the hour that I have into these topics. So if there's interest, I'm willing to do a 4-part series in May, either a Tuesday or Wednesday evening. It can be virtual or in person, kind of whatever you guys want, if you guys are interested. So there is a sign-up sheet. That's not a commitment sheet. It's just if you want more information, I'll email you. All right, so here's the game plan for tonight. I'll differentiate between what anxiety is and what an anxiety disorder is. And we'll talk about how anxiety is impacted the brain and the body. Then we'll talk about a big shift and how we're responding to anxiety differently. I'll briefly talk about patterns, but again, that 4-week workshop will go deeper into the patterns. And then how do we all get stuck, including myself. So first, I want to plant the seed of this question to kind of think about during our presentation. How do you respond when anxiety shows up for you, for your child, for your whole family? Is it working? Is it not working? Are things going smoothly? I'm guessing probably not if you guys are here, but maybe I'm wrong, I don't know. So hopefully tonight you will gain one thing to do differently and how to interrupt anxiety from getting bigger and stronger. So all of us in this room have felt anxious. I'm feeling a little bit anxious right now because I'm usually not talking to a group of 30 people. So we've all felt anxious, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I have an anxiety disorder, right? So there's a big difference between feeling anxious, that's just a feeling that we all feel because we're all humans, and an anxiety disorder. And anxiety disorders are the most common mental health diagnosis in the world, but they're also the most treatable. And in my opinion, I would say that they are preventable, and we'll talk about more about that in a second. So anxiety disorders interrupt your life socially, academically, in relationships. There's a lot of somatic symptoms with anxiety, such as migraines, IBS, chronic muscle pain, lots of sleep disruption, and poor emotional management, right? So I feel like this is pretty much general knowledge, but anxiety can be invasive. It's not just you're worrying about something. It can be really damaging if it goes untreated. Tonight I'll be using the phrase anxiety, but there's lots of subtypes of anxiety disorders, but all the things I talk about tonight will be effective for panic disorder, phobias, perfectionism, separation. So no matter what subtype of anxiety is, the things I talk about tonight will apply to all of those subtypes. So really quickly about causation. There is not an identified anxiety gene, which means it's probably more nurture and less nature. However, we know that temperament and personality traits definitely make you more at risk at developing an anxiety disorder, but it's certainly not a guarantee. So if you are more introverted, more shy, and less risk averse, right, you're more at risk at developing an anxiety disorder, but it's certainly not a guarantee. In the SPACE program out of the Yale Child Study Center with Dr. Leibovitz, he has found that there are certain parenting constructs that influence their family and influence their child that make their child more likely to develop an anxiety disorder. And some of those constructs are when a parent models avoidant patterns. So maybe a parent is less likely to put themselves into situations that bring up their own anxiety. When there's lots of parental accommodation happening, and I'll define an accommodation on the next slide. But some common accommodations would be ordering for your child when you go out to dinner, pulling them out of a sports activity or a school play because they come home and they're worried one day. Another construct is parental over-involvement in the child's decision-making. So your child's not having a lot of autonomy to make their own decisions or to problem solve independently. And so what we know is that a parent who has untreated anxiety, their child is 6 to 7 times more likely to develop an anxiety disorder versus a child that has a parent that does not have an anxiety disorder, which is that's a pretty big difference, right? But that does not mean that we're doomed and gloomed, right? So we know that anxiety is really treatable, and since it's not a biological trait that is in our DNA, that means that it's unlearnable. If it's a learned behavior, it can certainly be unlearned. And that's where I come in, right? So that is where psychotherapy, behavior changes, cognitive behavioral therapy can really be effective. And that's why I say it can really be preventative if we catch this thing early. So an accommodation is any action that a parent does to help a child avoid or alleviate distress related to feeling anxious. So like I said, ordering for your child at a restaurant, or nighttime rituals are a big thing, like having everything exactly the same way every single night, because if not, your child won't go to bed. Those are just 2 examples of accommodation. There's just so many to list. So if you have any questions about part 1. Okay. All right, so you should have the colorful handout with the anxiety cycle on there. That goes a little bit more in detail than what's on the screen. But this is something that I give to every single family, every single teenager, every single 6-year-old that I see in my office. Because if I'm gonna ask you to do something different that is usually really hard and scary at first, then I absolutely believe you need to know what is happening in my brain, what is happening in my body, and how does this thing work, right? So I know for me personally, if I understand how something works, I'm going to be much more successful when someone asks me to do something. So first, there's the triggering situation. In this scenario, I'll use a kid raising their hand in the classroom, or maybe asking your boss for a raise or for a promotion. Both situations will invoke some anxiety, right? And with anxious people, there's that uncertainty, that self-doubt that starts to play in your head of, I don't know if I can handle this. If I raise my hand, what are the consequences? If I ask my boss for a raise, what if they say no? And so that uncertainty starts to kick on our physical symptoms because, like I said, anxiety is very much a somatic internal disorder, right? So maybe my heart starts to beat faster, maybe my stomach gets a little bit woozy, I start to feel nauseous, maybe I sweat, my face gets red. So those physical symptoms, of course, don't make me feel better, don't boost me with confidence that I can raise my hand in math class. They just increase that self-doubt. So now I'm thinking, okay, well now I feel anxious, I feel like I'm gonna throw up, I'm already starting to doubt myself. There's no way I can go towards this thing that's making me anxious, right? So what happens is that we avoid. And avoidance, we all do it. I'm not shaming avoidance, but it's a great short-term solution. It works really well, because as soon as I say I'm not raising my hand or I'm gonna ask my boss next week for that raise, what happens to my anxiety? It goes away, right? And I just like feel this rush of relief come over me. However, oftentimes avoidance is the pattern that gets really ingrained in families, and it's a terrible long-term solution because we never learn how to step towards the thing that's making us anxious or begin to tolerate those emotional symptoms or those physical symptoms. And so where the change happens is at that pink part where we can either go towards or we can go or we can avoid, right? So that's where my interventions come into place of we are still going to feel anxious, we are still going to have uncertainty, we're still going to have doubt, and we're going to go towards the thing. We're not going to step away. Because when we start to step away, when we start to step away instead of stepping towards, what happens is our world gets smaller and smaller and smaller, right? So maybe we stop going to birthday parties. We stop going to that restaurant because one time I got sick. We stop going into the grocery store to get our food, or we stop going into Starbucks to get our frappuccinos. We just order on the app. So we start to make these changes, and eventually our worlds get really small. And what happens is that we become more alone, more isolated, and more disconnected. And what we know is that untreated anxiety oftentimes leads to feelings of depression over time. It doesn't happen immediately, but I mean, if you look at all the data, there's a major crisis for adolescents and young people. I see them in my office all the time, and I can talk to a 22-year-old that was like, yeah, I started feeling anxious in like 5th grade, but she didn't do anything about it, not because she didn't want to, but she just didn't know, and now she's really depressed, right? So it's not an uncommon trajectory. So our goal is to get our worlds bigger by going towards, by getting more experiences, and by seeking out more opportunities. A really quick science lesson. I am not a science teacher, nor will you be quizzed on this, but there's 2 parts of the brain that are important in the anxiety cycle. And why this is important is because, like I said, there's so many physical symptoms associated with anxiety, especially a younger kid. So I teach this to my 5-year-old, 6-year-old clients. So first, there's your prefrontal cortex, the part right behind your forehead. It's a pretty large part of your brain. Your imagination lives here, critical thinking skills, problem-solving skills. Most other animals don't have a large prefrontal cortex because they don't have to decide what to make for dinner tonight or where are we going on summer vacation, right? So prefrontal cortex is pretty important for problem-solving, decision-making. The other part of the brain is your amygdala. It's about the size of an almond and it's backed by your brainstem. It's like your body's smoke detector. And so its job is to keep you alive and to alert us of danger. And just like my smoke detector at home, sometimes it doesn't know what is a real threat and what's a fake threat, right? So our amygdala can't tell the difference between a legitimate threat and a false alarm. Sometimes it goes off when it doesn't need to. The interesting thing when it comes to anxiety is both parts can't be working at the same time. And so if your prefrontal cortex is in charge, then you're thinking rationally, you're problem solving. However, once your amygdala gets activated and it perceives that there is danger around, your prefrontal cortex is going to take a step back, amygdala is going to take a step up, because remember, its goal is to keep us alive. And this process has been happening for thousands of years. And that's why the human species is still here and not extinct. So it does a really good job at this when there is a life-threatening situation. So amygdala is in charge, it's reacting, prefrontal cortex takes a step back, because if a T-Rex ran into this auditorium right now, I wouldn't want my prefrontal cortex to be in charge. I wouldn't want to be thinking, I would just want to be reacting. So this is really cool in that our brain knows how to do these things, but sometimes my brain can't tell the difference between a T-Rex and a pop quiz, or a T-Rex and trying something new. It gets it confused. So your amygdala is in charge. It sends a message to your adrenal glands down by your kidneys. Sarah's about to die, we have to do something. Adrenal gland starts to produce 2 stress hormones, adrenaline and cortisol. So now my heart is beating really fast. It's pumping these stress hormones throughout my body, and all of these crazy things start to happen in my body pretty much instantaneously. My brain tells my digestive system, Sarah doesn't really need to digest her dinner tonight. She's getting chased by a T-Rex. So my digestive system slows down. The blood from my belly goes to my outer extremities. So now I have butterflies in my stomach. I start to feel really nauseous, like I'm going to throw up. Do any of these symptoms sound familiar to your kids at home, or maybe to your own self? So the point is that when your kid, or when you yourself or your partner says, I don't feel very good because I'm anxious, or mommy, my belly hurts, believe them, because it's probably happening. It probably is happening. However, that doesn't mean that we stop everything and we wait until we feel okay. Because sometimes we have to retrain our amygdala that this isn't a T-Rex, this is just a pop quiz. And that takes a lot of experience and a lot of opportunities. Does anybody have any questions about science stuff? I don't know a lot, but this is what I know. Okay, so then the biggest question is like, all right, Sarah, well, now my amygdala is activated and my body feels really crappy. Now what do I do? And that's a great question. So we know that the more oxygen we get into our bloodstream, it lowers the levels of those stress hormones. Our prefrontal cortex comes back alive and is able to then think rationally. It's like, oh, that's not a real T-Rex, right? And so how we do this is, of course, by breathing. So let's all just breathe for 30 seconds. So is breathing the magical anxiety trick? No. But it is helpful when we are in that fight, fight, freeze response, when our amygdala is in charge. So yes, breathing works. However, it's not the quick fix, right? Breathing, when I often ask my little ones, so what do you know about anxiety? And they say, oh, well, I learned how to breathe. Fantastic. Breathing is great, right? But it's not the only solution. It can't be the only tool in your toolbox, because it doesn't work with the preventative stuff, right? So if I am breathing before, like I was doing some breathing on my way here, but I was still feeling anxious. So breathing is not going to get the symptoms to go away. It's not going to make my anxious thoughts go away. It will help with some of those physical symptoms though. The other part about breathing is that I find that clients only practice breathing when they're in fight, flight, freeze. And so that's like practicing CPR when someone's having a heart attack. It doesn't work like that. So if you're going to use breathing as a tool, then it needs to be a daily practice. And it doesn't have to be, a meditation for 10 minutes. It could be, hey, we're going to brush our teeth and then practice 30 seconds of breathing. Okay, here comes the big shift of how do we interrupt anxiety? What do we do differently? So I asked you before, How do you respond when anxiety shows up? And now I'm gonna show you some ways in which we can interrupt that pattern. So we're gonna go from avoidance and elimination and accommodation to tolerance and acceptance. And we all tolerate things already. We tolerate pizza toppings, we tolerate ice cream flavors, we tolerate our kids' taste in music, we tolerate people at Thanksgiving, right? We tolerate things. And emotions are the same thing. Like, we don't love them, they're not our favorite, but they can just coexist with us. And the thing is that our brain tricks us into believing, I'm gonna feel anxious and I'm just gonna stay there forever, right? I'm gonna go up this roller coaster, I'm just gonna hang out on the hill, and I'm never ever gonna feel anything else. That's not true. So our brain plays tricks on us all the time. And then we have to accept that, yeah, things are gonna be hard in life. When we raise our hand in class, that's tricky. When we ask our boss for a raise or a promotion, that's tricky. We have to accept that. So we can't always look for the easy way out. We have to accept that things are gonna be difficult and things are gonna be challenging, and we can still do it. So a good question to ask yourself is, who's in the driver's seat? I like this metaphor of just asking people, so is anxiety and worry the primary decision maker of your life? Because if it is, it's probably not working out very well for you. You should be the primary decision maker. You should be able to make the decisions and not say, well, I'm gonna do this because I know that my anxiety won't flare up. Or I have to stay away from this because if I don't, then my anxiety is gonna flare up. So I want you to be doing the things that make you happy and the things that are important to you, not important to your feelings. And so the goal is, yes, anxiety is gonna be in the car. We can't get rid of it. I joke with my kids, we can tie them on the roof, we can shove them in the glove box. Like, anxiety is gonna be in the car somewhere, just not in the driver's seat. And so that can be a helpful framework of, if you're stuck of like, I don't know, is this anxiety, is this not? Ask yourself, am I doing the things that I wanna do, or am I accommodating to make life easy for myself or for the people that I live with? All right, the two things that anxiety wants are certainty and comfort. I think a lot of people get stuck in like, well, she's afraid of getting stung by a bee, so bees make her anxious. Or she's afraid of birthday parties because she doesn't know who's all gonna be there. And I think we can get lost in figuring out what it is that's making us anxious, or why are we feeling anxious. And I think, in my opinion, that's sometimes a waste of time, that we need to zoom out and look, okay, is anxiety seeking certainty or is it seeking comfort? And what do I know by certainty? Or what do I mean by certainty? Anxiety wants all the information all of the time. It can never have enough information. So think of anxiety as like that children's book, if you give a mouse a cookie, it just wants more and more and more. And so you might be that way of like, let me just research that restaurant one more time to make sure it has everything that everyone would eat. Or let me look at that color beach bag one more time just to see, like, do I really want that color or do I want this color? Like, it will never have enough information, and it keeps you stuck. And then you feel emotionally exhausted, and then you feel physically exhausted, and it's just a lose-lose situation. So anxiety is always seeking more and more information. And I see this a lot. I would say there was a really good article that I read recently. Just the last 30 years, we've been bombarded with more information because of technology. And so there's very little time in our day-to-day life where we don't know, because I can look on my cell phone right now and know pretty much anything that I want to. I can know where my friends are, I can know what they're eating, I can know the lyrics to the song that I listen to on the radio on the way here, I can know what the specials are going to be at the restaurant this weekend, I can know anything. So it's not uncommon that I am always getting the information that I need. Even before streaming services, we would have to wait a whole week until the new episode comes out. And now we don't even have to sit and wait. I can just binge watch the whole thing in one weekend. So there's very few times where we just have to sit with I don't know, which means our tolerance for uncertainty is super short as adults and with kids. And comfort is just being inside that cozy comfort zone that we all know and love. And yeah, it feels really good there, but that's not where growth happens, right? That's not where we experience new things. That's not where we try new things. We have to be able to step outside of our comfort zone and deal with let's see what happens. And anxiety does not want us to do that. Anxiety wants us to remain in the comfort zone and have all the information that we could ever possibly need. Any questions about this slide? I feel like this is a big one. Okay. So anxiety treatment is really simple. It's not this complex 15-step thing. In my opinion, it's really simple. Now, it's not easy. It can be actually quite hard and difficult, and it's not a quick fix. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes a lot of practice. It takes a lot of practice outside of therapy sessions. It's a daily practice that you have to do in order for there to be progress to be made. But it is really quite simple, because anxiety treatment, to sum it up in 3 words, is we're doing the opposite. So what does that mean? Well, you can probably think of the rules that anxiety has placed on your life, on your kid's life, on your family's life of, we have to do things this way in order to prevent a flare-up. We have to do things this way so that everyone is calm. Those are anxiety's rules, right? So my challenge to you is to start doing the opposite. And when we start doing the opposite, there's brain changes that happen. And what does that mean? That we are now rewiring our brain, and we are teaching our amygdala that that's not a T-Rex, that is just a pop quiz. Or that's not a T-Rex, that's just we're going to a new restaurant. So every time we do a new experience, we're teaching our brain these things, and neuroscientists have figured out that you can rewire your biochemistry in your brain, so your amygdala is not always flaring up. So instead of avoiding, we're going towards. Instead of eliminating those feelings, we are sitting with. So that might mean that as a parent, you have to witness your child in distress. And that's really, really hard. It's really, really hard. And we have to be able to coach them that this feeling is not going to last forever, right? And instead of over-accommodating, we are supporting. So all good parents accommodate. I want to be clear about that. Like, all good parents do accommodation, and that's okay. It's just that over-accommodation is when it starts to become a problem. So instead of accommodating, we are supporting, and supporting means that we are using language such as, I know this is, Sarah, I know you're feeling really nervous tonight, and you can still get up there and do that. So we can use supportive language with our kids, and we can also use supportive language with ourselves. And it's probably best to start using it with ourselves so that we can start practicing it and really get it good, and then we can start to use it with our kiddos. So this is an example of a supportive statement. This is what I presented on last year with the SPACE program of using both acceptance and confidence are the two parts for the supportive statement. So without acceptance, you're kind of being dismissive of like, yeah, just go out there and do it. You're not really acknowledging that this is really hard for them or really hard for you. And without that confidence, that's where the over-accommodation comes in of, okay, well, you're feeling anxious. Well, maybe we'll just skip it, or I'll do it for you. And what that implies is, I don't believe that you can handle this, right? That is the nonverbal message that's being communicated. So we need both parts in order for it to be a supportive statement. Let's watch a quick video about neuroplasticity. All right, so here is the game plan. So when your child is feeling anxious, or when you yourself is feeling anxious, we're going to expect it. And what that means is that we're not going to treat, when I start to feel, so I'll use myself for an example for tonight. So I knew that I was giving this presentation, and as the day continued, I started to get those butterflies in my stomach, and I just noticed like I had extra energy in my body. I felt it, right? And so it would be really silly for me, like, I wonder why my body's reacting this way. Like, what is going on, right? And no, I expected my belly to feel weird. I expected to have this extra nervous energy. So I can't treat my body's signals or even some of the thoughts that I was having as an emergency. This is not breaking news. Like, oh yeah, I'm giving a presentation tonight. It's outside of my comfort zone. It's not my top 5 list of favorite things to do. So I can't treat it as like anxiety is telling me this something that is important or something that I need to listen to. So instead I'm gonna treat it of like, oh yeah, it's you again. You're boring, you're annoying, you're really persistent, you keep coming up even when I start to forget that I have this thing tonight, you keep coming back and reminding me. So I think that's a good way to frame it for yourself and for your kids, that we have to expect it to show up. I have been working with a young family for about 1.5 years, like clockwork. Every single morning, after they eat breakfast, mom says, go upstairs and get dressed. What happens? Stomach starts to hurt and she throws up. She's in 2nd grade. Like clockwork, every single morning. And this was last fall. And so now mom's like, yep, you're gonna throw up. And they have the bucket there and she knows exactly what to do. The bucket's in the car, the bucket's on the school bus. So we have to expect it to happen, right? She's not throwing up anymore. But that was a really big shift of like, oh wait, we can't treat this as an emergency. This is just something that happens, right? So the second thing we're gonna do is we're gonna externalize it. Why? Because anxiety and worry does not like to be playful. It does not like to be silly. Anxiety and worry wants to take things very seriously. They're the fun police, right? It takes the fun out of everything. So when we externalize it, when we say, hey, family, if your worry came to life and was sitting in this chair, what would it look like? Draw me a picture. What would it sound like if it had a voice? What would you name it? And so I also participate in this activity too. And this is Mildred, my worry part. And this gives families language to talk about their feelings when we don't really like to talk about worry, especially when we're in that fight, fight, freeze. Right? So what is Mildred saying to you? When I had my consult yesterday with my mentor, I was like, I'm feeling kind of anxious about tomorrow. Do you know what she did? She was like, what is your worry saying to you, Sarah? So she's like, this is what she's doing with me as well. So it gives us language to talk about. It allows us to be silly and playful. And it also creates this approach that it's team parent and child versus team emotion instead of parent versus child. So it really focuses on building connection in the family instead of disconnection. So we are expecting it, we are externalizing it, and we are then going to experiment. So we are getting out there, we are making our world bigger, we are doing that neuroplasticity, we are getting curious, we are using phrases of, I don't know what's gonna happen, let's find out. I'm not sure if you like sweet potato fries, let's try it and see. And we are gonna collect data of what worked, what didn't work, right? And then final step is we're gonna evaluate, we're gonna do a post-game analysis. In the post-game analysis, the focus cannot be on the outcome, because if your child is brave and they go towards the thing that makes them anxious and they raise their hand in math class, but maybe the teacher didn't call on them, or maybe they get the wrong answer, that's not the focus, right? The focus is they did the thing that makes them feel anxious. Did you have a question? Yeah, so the question was, can anxiety be masked by something that appears to be positive, right?
Like instead of down,
Yeah, that's what high functioning perfectionism is, right? Like that's what my college students who have never failed a test before because they were the good student, they were the good kid, and now they're in their first year of college and they can't handle that they might get a B on their transcript. Yeah, that is an example. Or just like sometimes that's also used as a protective factor of I don't want to make mom or dad worried. Right? So I'm going to say like, nope, things are fine over here. I don't got any problems. And so that is another pattern that can happen as well. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, yes. And
So the question was, I'm just repeating it so that the mic, so the question is, if they're not going to acknowledge that they're feeling anxious, then how do you talk about it? Well, you still talk about it. You still model, and that's where space comes in, and that's why I don't see kids under age 16 in my office without a parent present. I just don't, and some people don't like that, and that's okay, but when I work with anxious families, I need to teach the parents what to do, because if an 8-year-old is saying, no, I'm fine, like, I'm not anxious, but parents are like, yeah, I'm sensing some anxiety, then I need to teach you how to interrupt this pattern. And so that's where parent-only treatment comes into play. I mean, I have kids that say like, Sarah doesn't know what they're talking about, Mom. Please don't make me go back to Sarah. I hate seeing Sarah. I'm like, that's okay. Then if you're gonna sit there and not talk to me, then I'm just gonna talk to Mom and Dad about your anxiety. And believe me, they start talking about stuff really quickly. So yeah, that's not an uncommon thing, that they want to keep it all together because it's so scary to say like, I don't know what to do with this. It's so scary. Yep, so evaluation, we're focusing less on the outcome, more about the process. And then always, always, always celebrate the successes, no matter how big or small they are. I have a big thing in my office of we can do hard things, and there's a variety of things on that wall. Anything from, I went skiing for the first time, to I got my driver's license, to I tried mac and cheese. Like, so your definition of hard is very different, but we need to be celebrating that. And I think that's a great exercise to do at home, just in your own home, of let's celebrate the hard things, or let's celebrate when we tried something new. All right, I'm going to skip patterns just because we only have 15 minutes left. And I could talk a whole hour about patterns, but it is on your page, and if you guys want to learn more, then the workshop can be helpful, because there's a bunch of them, and I only have 4 up here. So I'm going to skip that so we can talk about where we get stuck. So we get stuck, by prioritizing physical symptom reduction, that we have to feel calm, we have to feel like in control, we have to feel ready in order to do therapy, or in order to do the hard thing. Like, I have to feel ready before I eat mac and cheese. Yeah, okay, well, I'm not gonna force feed you mac and cheese, but the longer that we prolong it, then the bigger it feels, right? So we're gonna feel nervous in our belly, we're gonna have those anxious thoughts, and we're still gonna try something. We're still gonna do the thing that we've been avoiding. We also get stuck if the goal is to completely eradicate anxiety. Anxiety is gonna be here, and we still have to learn how to sit with it, to tolerate it. Which is why I think there are so many coping skills, and I have parents call me like, can you teach my daughter coping skills? I can, absolutely, but they certainly, I don't know. I think now there's this, the language around coping skills is like, I just don't want her to feel anxious. Well, that's not what I'm going to do. I'm not gonna get rid of your anxiety. We're just gonna learn, like, when it shows up, how do we respond to it? So things like fidget spinners and all of the things that distract us, that's fine, but it doesn't really do anything with your feelings except like, oh, when I'm done with the fidget spinner, I'm still feeling anxious, right? So not that they're bad things, they're just not great treatment options. We focus too much on the content, on why am I feeling this way, what is making them anxious. I think that's, in my experience, that's where parents get stuck too, is I don't know why she's feeling anxious. Like, we have a pretty easy life. Like she loves school, she has friends, she's da, da, da. It's like, I don't really know why. She just is, so let's respond differently. Let's learn how to interrupt this thing so it doesn't grow. So we zoom out, we identify what the 2 C's are. Is this because she's needing certainty, or is she needing to remain comfortable? Parents' own untreated anxiety. I mean, life has been really tricky the last 5 years, so it's not shocking that some of us are feeling anxious. And so we know that parents' untreated anxiety impacts their children. Us modeling anxious patterns is also something that if we don't recognize them, then we can't interrupt them, right? So now that we know better, we can do better. That's all. Too much accommodation. So I want you to ask yourself, what are 1 or 2 things that you're doing for your child right now that they're fully capable of doing? Is it packing their lunch? Is it filling up their water bottle? Is it getting their baseball bag ready? Is it putting their toys away? Is it filling out their job applications or college applications? I had a parent that, she's a daughter that's 18 that was doing Uber Eats or something. And she was riding in the car with her daughter because she wanted her to be safe. And I was like, okay. Like, I get where that's coming from, but when you were in high school and the guys in your school were Domino delivery drivers and they had their mom in their front seat, what would you think about them? She was like, oh my gosh, I would be that weird mom. I'm like, yeah, you are the weird mom, like riding in the car. And she's like, I didn't even realize that. It's like, well, that's an accommodation. Like, now that we know better, we can do better. But they're fully capable of dropping off Chinese food to somebody's house. And are you promoting avoidance, either through your own actions and behaviors, or kind of modeling that in your family? And are you giving too much reassurance? So it's okay to reassure kids, but what I know is that kids ask a lot of questions, and anxious kids ask a lot of questions. And you know that it's reassurance if they're asking the same question over and over again. Mom, what time are we leaving for the birthday party? 3 o'clock. Mom, what time are we leaving for the birthday party? Is that gonna be enough time? Are we gonna be late? That's reassurance. So how you respond to that is, hey, it looks like Mildred's popping up. I already told you that we're leaving at 3 o'clock, so what do you wanna do about Mildred? Because it sounds like she's being really annoying right now. Yeah, so I'm not responding to worry anymore. Yep, it sounds like your worry's in charge. And I'm all for supporting you, but I'm not supporting your worry, right? And so you have to do that front loading beforehand. You have to do the externalization and all of that work that I talked about earlier before you say, well, I'm just not gonna answer you. Yeah, so if they are continuing asking you, you say, listen, buddy, like we already talked about this. It sounds like worry is really getting on your nerves. What should we do about worry? And then maybe they can say like, worry, I know that I'm leaving at 3 o'clock. You're nervous that we're gonna be late. And if we're late, that's okay. It's not the end of the world, right? But we're gonna leave at 3 o'clock, so I'm gonna be ready at 3 o'clock. And so that's, that is a conversation that you can help your child have to their worry. Being too hard on ourselves, trying to be the perfect parent, that goes along with certainty, right? There's so much information, podcasts, TED Talks, books, articles, all of the things about how to be the best parent. And some of them are probably right, and some of them are probably terrible information. But just stop trying to be the perfect parent because you already are one, right? You guys are here tonight wanting to know this stuff. So you're here, you're learning. Stop being so hard on yourself. We already have all the skills that we need to be a good parent, right? You do. You just don't believe it, but you do. And forgetting that we have to model self-compassion, and the more that we strive to be that perfect parent, what are you modeling for your kids? Perfectionism, right? That we have to do things the same way and I can't make mistakes. And that's not a good way to model life. So Lenora Skenazy, she was a writer for the New York Sun back in 2008, maybe, I don't know. Her 9-year-old son asked her one day to ride the New York City subway. They lived in Manhattan, I think. And her husband were like, I don't know. Well, if you really want to. And so they taught him the routes and all the things to ride the subway system. And he did. There's a great YouTube clip of they met at Bloomingdale's. She went home and he rode the train and then the bus system back home at 9 years old. And she wrote an article about it. She got so much flack about world's worst parent. How could you do that? What if he would have gotten X, Y, and Z, right? And she said, to me, love means recognizing that there's a whole person there, not just a precious object, and the person deserves to grow, right? And I love that framework that if we keep them in the bubble, they're not going to grow and they're gonna feel really anxious and they're gonna perceive the world as a really scary place and feel really fragile. And so I'm not suggesting that you that you throw your 9-year-old kids on the T system tomorrow, but that we have to teach them skills so that they are able to be equipped for life. Because what I'm seeing now with my college students, clients, that they miss the target. Like they are not competent in they don't know how to tell the Starbucks barista that their drink is wrong. And they don't have skills. So teach skills, model skills, and I think that's the direction that we need to go in. We have 5 minutes left for questions. I know that I talked fast probably, but I was trying to get everything out. So if you guys have questions, I would be happy to answer them. Does anybody have any questions? Yes.
I have a question about accommodations and prep.
Mm-hmm.
We always do a prep where we pre-talk about what's going to happen and what's going to be there.
And is that for the kid is requesting that, or are you giving it just to help them out?
Both.
Okay.
Both. So now I'm wondering, is that prep that I think is very helpful and nice actually way too much accommodating and enabling?
You already know the answer.
Is there a level of prep that's okay, or is it all just accommodating?
Yeah, I mean, if it's the first time on the airplane of well, this is what we can expect to happen, but if you guys fly every year, you don't have to say, okay, we're gonna get in and we're gonna buckle our seatbelt. So with new things, you're allowed to give them information. You can give them, this is what to expect, or don't make stuff up if you don't know. Of I don't know, we'll just see what happens, right? Yeah?
What if anxiety is a comorbidity with other neurodivergent issues like ADHD or autism, highly functional, and they have elements such as forgetfulness and mindlessness, or rather,
Yeah.
spacing out.
All of the things, right?
So what part where's that line?
So the question was, what if there is anxiety with autism, ADHD, and forgetfulness and executive functioning? So I always look at skills. So what skill do you need to target? You need to target organization, setting reminders, other executive functioning skills. So that's what I would really start to build those skills. And so think of it as scaffolding, right? So maybe in the beginning, you're gonna do a lot of reminders, and then you're gonna start to pull back that scaffolding, and that might mean that they forget their homework assignment, they forget their gym clothes, they forget their baseball bag, and they have to kind of deal with its consequences, right? Yeah, and that's the hard part.
Natural consequences.
Oh yeah, I'm all for natural consequences. At first, yeah. And then that would also, then you have to do that post-game analysis of, okay, so I noticed that you forgot your backpack today. What can we do tomorrow so that, what worked, what didn't work, right? So we're having that conversation because mom's not dropping it off tomorrow.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
Building on those comment or a question about masking and lack of communicating, and then you still talk about it, but then the child basically stops listening or participating or engaging.
Yep.
What's the solution and approach for that?
So parents have to do something different. So if you think of families as kind of an organization, once the CEO starts making changes, it's going to trickle down to the little people, right? So you have to, what I would ask, what pattern of anxiety, and I know we didn't go over that slide in full detail tonight, but like what patterns are coming up with your child that is causing you to think that they're anxious, and then I would start to model the opposite pattern. So if your child's really rigid, then parents need to start modeling a lot of flexibility. Does that make sense? Yeah. If a child is really catastrophic, like the world is going to crumble to pieces tomorrow, then we need to start modeling more, how do we assess reasonable risk? How do we use logical thinking and rational thinking to counteract that? Does that make sense?
So let's say a child doesn't communicate, so what the parents do is model talking about their day?
Yep, so I would start talking about emotions. I would take a mason jar, write down all 25, 30 different emotions, and every night we pick out an emotion. First we have to define it, then everybody talks about a time that they felt that way, or a time that a character in a book or a movie feels that way. Or for family movie night, you pause the TV show and says, I wonder what feeling Joey is feeling. Can anyone take a guess? So we start to talk about that we all have emotions. Even if they don't want to talk about them, they still feel them, right? Yep, that's a great question. Yeah?
How much of anxiety is nature versus nurture, do you think? How much of it is the modeling portion versus the just innate wiring in the brain and that we need to rewire through the lessons?
I don't know if you had to like hold me up and make me tell you a percentage. I would probably say 70-30, 70 nurture, 30 biological, but that is just me using my life experience for that. But we know that it's not 100% nature, and that's a really good thing, right? Did you?
It can be managed, but I just didn't know if it was to know the gut check if you're the one creating it versus if it's just innately there.
Yeah, I mean, so you're going to be, if it is in your DNA, then, or I'm sorry, if you have a predisposition as far as your temperament or your personality traits make you more likely to have the anxiety disorder, you can still model how to develop skills so there's prevention there. Does that make sense? Yes. You guys are like the little question group over here. Oh, so you're all feeling anxious about next year? Yeah.
Because I have the children of extremes. Everything's fantastic or garbage.
Yep. So that's called
Great
going
or
global.
it's-
Yeah.
Or we're shutting down.
Mhm.
So it's like best day ever, worst day ever.
Yeah.
So how do you address like a situation like where they did something one time, they deeply disliked it, and they're never gonna try it again. Like the Noah's Ark at Kennywood.
Mhm.
Like a roller coaster.
Mhm.
Like where it's just like, this is terrible. We're never gonna go there again. We're not doing that again.
Mhm.
That kind of situation. Like I always approach things with like, your tastes change and what you like changes. If you don't try it, it might be your favorite thing and you didn't know.
Mhm.
So if you don't try things, you might miss out something that you
Right.
really like. But
Right.
but when you're talking at that level, like,
Mhm.
there's no discussion.
So I would ask your child, what did you like in 3rd grade that you don't like in 5th grade now? Or what did you not like in 3rd grade that you really like in 5th grade now? So that they can answer that question for themselves, that like, oh yeah, my brain can change and my taste can change and my interests can change. Or you can use like a different extreme of like, maybe in kindergarten your favorite TV show was Bluey and now it's not Bluey, right? So you can kind of start to poke holes in that theory that like, nope, I like what I like and you're not going to change it. Yeah.
In trying to like prep like my daughter or something or a situation, I'm having a little trouble with understanding like how to approach something and like be positive and trying to like introduce her to things, but also like not become toxic positive.
Yeah.
And just like not even maybe just like push too hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's where the question was like, how do I introduce something without being positively toxic, right? So I think that's where curiosity can be really helpful of, I don't know if we're gonna like this new playground, but let's, like you're allowed to have an opinion on it, but let's go and find out. We can, afterwards we can say, what are the things that we liked? What are the things that we don't like? So not everything has to be wonderful and amazing. Like there's things in life that we just don't like, and that's okay. But I think you can't make that decision until you have the experience. That's my general rule of thumb. Of like, you can't make that statement that I don't like roller coasters or I don't like mac and cheese. Well, when was the last time you had mac and cheese? Well, last night. Okay, well then you don't like mac and cheese. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so maybe it's not you're signing up for an entire season of something, but maybe you try a camp to see if you like it. Right? And then after the camp, you can say yes or no. So it's not like this entire commitment of something. My business cards are up here with my email address. So if you guys have any questions or want any more information or have ideas about workshops or anything, email me.
Can you speak about the workshop? You said you had a 4-part series in May. Is that going to be here or is that something private?
No, it will either be virtually or at my office. I haven't really decided yet. Yeah, I have like a group room in my office in Carnegie, or it could be on virtual, but I think, I don't know, I just like in person so much better. Yeah, so if you're interested, you can sign up up front. It's not a commitment, it's just like, hey, I want to know more about this. Thank you guys so much. You guys were awesome. Thank you so much for coming.